it just comes up, and
Recording is working.
it's working.
Yep.
Okay. All
We
right.
are not.
Well, all right. 3, 2, 1.
Welcome to AI. Recording wouldn't work, so had to start kind of weirdly. Welcome. Sunday morning. I think everybody's busy on Sunday morning because it seems like the recording wasn't working because of Sunday morning. They said we're busy. We can't record today. so, um, What a great guest we have today for our podcast because we are probably in the 66th episode, and I can kind of count and say how many episodes ago I've been waiting for Gerard to join us. So now that we have finally made the time, and now we're able to sit down and have this conversation, because this conversation happens offline all the time. So some of those offline conversations, I always insist that we need to bring it online, right? And bringing it online means meet Sunday morning, relax, chat, talk about artificial intelligence, and talk about artificial intelligence in a way that reduce the fear, increase the curiosity. Because fear creates that distance, curiosity brings you closer. That means curiosity makes you use it a lot more. So,
Mhm.
Lucky, I know you have your verbal copy there, but let me try. Ay, ay, ay.
Good morning, Gerard. Thank you for being here today.
So,
Good morning, guys. After an introduction like that, I can only disappoint. So,
Uh,
now, Gerard, I think I can make an introduction of you because I have tons of respect for you, and your background is amazing. But if I can just give one introduction about you, is that you've been on TV, right? So for you to come to the podcast, it's like, yeah, I don't have time for podcasts. Especially like something small like AI, because you've been on national TV talking about artificial intelligence. So to have you here, it's like a great honor. Thank you so much for making the time. Welcome.
no, glad to be here. It's such a great topic to talk about. We could talk about it for days on end. So
That's
it's
right.
always good to have a conversation with like-minded people around this topic.
Absolutely. And people that are listening in, they might think of AI from so many different perspectives. So this is just one of the perspectives. So we want to be able to feed in our perspective. And our perspective is always biased. It's the good and the bad, but mainly good, right? But we always have to talk about it in an impartial way about how bad it is. So let's jump into it, Gerard. Where do we start?
Well, I think we should take a step back and look at the bigger picture right now. Where are we in this wave, and what do we need to do to perhaps accelerate the wave? Right? We at least in my opinion, it's happening right now. It's going to happen. Nothing is going to stop it. And when we look back at other revolutions, we've seen the same thing, and certainly also the revolutions that have happened in the last 20 years, right? The advent of the cloud, the advent of the internet. Obviously the industrial revolution took a lot longer, and back in those days that all took longer, but it's going so fast right now. So it's almost like, if you don't jump on the train, you need to get out of the way, right? And so taking just a few seconds to say, where are we and how can we accelerate it, right? I think where we are right now is that there's one small group that have already forged ahead and are reaping the benefits of it, right? They were not afraid. These are companies, organizations, however you want to call it, even individuals that were not afraid, that dove in, that saw the opportunity, and now are reaping the benefits. They can demonstrate benefits. I've seen companies, 25% up in efficiency gains, for instance, right? But there's also still a large group that is still having a lot of debates, but not a lot of action. Debates in terms of, what is it? Where can we deploy it? Does it really work? And quite frankly, also some serious questions around risks, right? And I can fully understand it.
mhm.
But you gotta already at least make some movement, right? And so one of the questions is, how can we accelerate, particularly for that large part of the market? Part of that, at least in my opinion, but I'm interested in your guys' views as well, is more training, right? Training everybody, every individual over the next period needs to have some training, some level of particularly on the Gen AI side that sort of touches people more and that people can use as well, versus deep learning and machine learning that are more used by data scientists and the like, data engineers, data scientists. But Gen AI is something that everybody will encounter, everybody can use. So, at the very least, have a plan to train the entire workforce, right? That would be one. Two is find those early use cases that are not as risky. So, they might be on the outskirts of some of the core and common processes, right? And so they're less risky. It doesn't involve sensitive data. It doesn't involve, exposure to a large property, et cetera. Find a couple of use cases where at least you can get going. Take 3 to 5 to start with. And so people at least get the feel and the hang of it, but also get to see the technology, are not afraid of the technology. And then hopefully also generate some initial benefits that then can fund the next, 10 projects, right? And obviously, hire consultants, right? Hire people that have been there, done that can get you going, right? If it's only internal and there's nobody in the room that has experience with it, it makes for a lot less speed. Now, obviously, I'm saying that as a consultant, but it's true as well. It's absolutely true, right? Sometimes you need to have some folks, some new folks in the room to get you going.
No, you're absolutely right. From the industry perspective, I've been on the outside, and then now also being part of it and teaching. I see both sides. And also as a developer, it's easy to want, but then you realize what you're getting into, and it's sometimes you're maybe you're a little bit in over your head, maybe, or you don't really have a focus area. And I think where we're at now, it's easier now to say, okay, these are the areas that we can use AI, and it's solid. It provides statistical data. It provides, there's growth there that we can actually measure, and it's not so much of a risk in certain areas. In other areas, it's maybe not first principle, but you're getting close to developing things for the first time. And those may be areas that are more risky, and so being able to help people know how to traverse that. AI is not just one big bag of AI, just grab it and go. It's a lot of different moving parts, and we need people like yourself to be able to help us teach, train, how do you adopt it into your organization, and then you trust it. Because if you don't have any trust for it, you're not going to get funding. You're not going to, you have to be able to have some successes, even if small, to be able to say, okay, build.
Yeah. And actually, you touch on a very good point, Lucky, which is the trust aspect of it, right? How do you use AI responsibly and trustworthy? And that's also an exercise you have to go through a couple times to get comfortable with it, right? Because we all know that there are some potential risks and challenges associated with AI. Now, with Gen AI, less so than with deep learning and machine learning, typically, generally, I should say. But there's always questions around data security at a minimum, right? Because we're using data and we need more data. The more sophisticated we develop solutions using AI, typically you use more data. So that's a fair question, right? What's happening with my data? How's my data handled? Who has access to it? What does this AI machine do with it? And or is it somewhere seeping in the background out of my environment? Those are all valid questions, right? There's typically also a question of how do you use it responsibly, also from an ethical perspective, right? So there are some, and there's legal questions. More and more countries, more and more jurisdictions, I should say, are enacting AI-specific rules and laws, et cetera, right? And some industries are actually rolling it out as well. So now you have the legal question as well. So these are all valid questions and valid concerns, but they can all be managed, right?
Yes.
And so helping people think through it through a model, through a proven approach, helping people find the solutions to it, because we've done it, like I said, for every revolution, right? I was given the example earlier when we started with cloud. I don't know how many clients I had that were so afraid of cloud, right? Because it was something that they couldn't see. They could touch their server, they could touch their modem, they could touch everything and see everything, and now it's something that they can't see. So, and now we look at it, the adoption back in the days, you had like the fast adopters, like we always have for every revolution. And there were, some industries that were late adopters, right? The financial services industry was one. There were several of these industries, and now it's a whole different ballgame, right? Now almost everybody uses it. I can't imagine a company not using it. So we're going to go through the same motion with AI as well. We have to teach these organizations how to use it responsibly, and what tools and methods and models you need to use for that. And help them get comfortable with the fact that it can all be managed. All these risks typically can be managed.
Yeah, I love the direction of this conversation. So, you mentioned the fear, you mentioned the risk. So fear creates the distance, curiosity brings you closer. One of the things that you mentioned is that the industry has proven itself that this is real and this is working. So AWS recently came out and said they saved about 2,500 developer years specifically by using Gen AI to code, Gen AI to do AWS work. IBM went around the industries and they surveyed all sorts of Gen AI use cases. And the top use case for Gen AI was cybersecurity. Yeah. And the cybersecurity teams were just elated by the fact that Gen AI can augment the cybersecurity piece of it, which to an outsider who doesn't think about Gen AI, but knows a little bit about cybersecurity, they'll say that's impossible. Well, the industry has proven the fact that what's going on right now, it's working. Of course, it's not working perfectly, but behind the scene, a lot of things are actually working. And that kind of leads into, if you have the information, if your people know the information, all of a sudden it's the leadership that really needs to calm people down in the management level, beyond management, tactical level, right? So industry is reducing the fear. Leadership is what we need right now. Of course, somebody like you with leadership, you are reducing these fears, right? Because once you do that, reducing the fear part, all of a sudden everybody's kind of looking at it like, well, it's time for training. Because what reduces fear far better than training, right? Leadership shows up in the training. Rookie shows up in the training. The guy who just started yesterday shows up in the training. And they're all having sort of that baseline flatlining of information so that everybody can start from the same ground, right? Or at least see eye to eye on, okay, you're the subject matter expert of this, you're the subject matter expert of this. So what I'm describing here is the community of practice, right? Yeah. We do that a lot with lots of these events like cloud and blockchain and anything that you want to describe. We have a community practice. So this community practice of AI is no different. Well, one of the things that you also said is that like you have to have somebody from outside engage that community of practice, because what's happening is that because of these misaligned information, there's no a team alignment, right? Because the finance looks at it from differently, right? HR looks at it from differently, but the best one I've seen is the guys that are on shop floor, let's say in the manufacturing shop floor, they see it completely differently. They see machine and they think about machine learning. Trust me, I've had experience where people thought these machines are going to grow legs and start walking out. Just the terminology itself throws people off completely. Right? Machine learning is
comes out
walking, right? So the importance of community practice and the training and engagement.
And I think there's one, because I fully agree with you. The community practice, I do agree with you. Some outside perspective, particularly from folks that have been there, done that, that can sort of immediately help you see a use case that you can immediately deploy and get benefits from, but also have proven methods, tools, all that great stuff, right? I think that there's one more, which is pilot project. Not a pilot project because you have to approach everything with a pilot project, but it's more to have people, particularly on the Gen AI side, to have people feel it, touch it, work with it, right? But some folks still have a fear, in addition to maybe not being trained well and not fully understanding it yet, but there's a fear. The fear factor can be overcome by just trying it. And as I said before, try with some in some less risky areas. So if you fail, you fail fast, right? That's fine. But in most cases with Gen I, you don't fail. The failure might be seen as, well, I only have 10% of or less efficiency gain. That's not a failure, right? That's it's not a great gain, but it's still a gain, right? So find those pilot projects just to get people comfortable.
I think there's some similarities of, like, when you have training, when you have these instructions or community practice, or just getting together, doing powwows, so that way everybody's having that same baseline. For cloud, it was different. Blockchain, it was going to be different. Blockchain didn't really pick up that much. But for AI, I think it's going to be totally different, right? Because AI is a massive, broad scope of use cases, broad scope of data, broad scope of just processing power, right?
Yeah.
And it's a continuous evolution that is happening, not necessarily month by month, but day by day. If you look at IBM, they will talk about AI year, right? A lost data in the AI space is like a year worth of data that's just disappeared, right? So these sort of the community practice, they really don't need to go to school for 18 weeks in MIT and call it a day, say, now I'm ready. Or go to school for UT Austin for 6 weeks and pay $18,000 to say, now I'm ready. I don't think AI works that way. I think the AI community practice needs to be on a weekly basis, training every week, not necessarily training, but informational sessions where you're able to brainstorm with each other. And that's the power of flatlining for a team, that every team member goes out there, gets information, and comes back to that community practice on a weekly basis on a Wednesday afternoon, say, this is what I've learned last week. What do you guys know about this? Now let's talk about it, right? Because I think you're talking about picking a use case. And there's tons of use cases out there. But if everybody's fighting over the use case, they're not aligned. They're misaligned to the business priorities, the business intelligence, and the business's intention, capability, and opportunities, right? You can have all the intentions in the world, but if you don't have one intention, you will never build one right capability that will strike at the right opportunity, right?
Yeah.
So I think this is a far different community practice, far different methods of approaching it.
Yeah, and the beauty of Gen AI is that the best use cases are typically found by the lead folks in a community. So the folks that initially adopt, so take a supporting process, take finance or HR, or any of these processes as an example. The person in accounts receivable might be the first one to pick it up. And that person will then identify multiple use cases because they're closest to that process, right? They then hopefully can get there, and I'm picking on accounts receivable right now, it could be AP, could be any area. They then hopefully can help their fellow finance folks do the same thing. Because again, those are the folks that are closest to the problems and or the savings, right? And or the opportunities, right?
Yeah, I know I have some use cases that is my favorite, but I know, Lucky, do you have any favorite use cases that you can think of?
Oh, I got plenty of use cases. I've had use cases from an enterprise or a large corporate security standpoint. And then I have use cases where people just ask me, "Hey, Lucky, what about this?" And you brought one up just a second ago that kind of hit hard. Is I had a friend of mine ask me, "Hey, can AI help me create an RFP customized to my needs, the customer, and everything?" And I said, yeah, it could do that. And I said, I'm not really good at this. I'm not a contract specialist, but tell you what. And I just asked the question, and I believe I was using Chat GPT. I was using, let me see, just to make sure. I was using AI Chat, which is very simple. It uses Chat GPT. And I said, yeah, let me just run this through a cycle. And I gave her the output. But see, the thing is this is from that extreme to you have people that are working on the other side of it, where you brought up is sometimes you have to have a pilot. Sometimes you don't know. There's other pilots where we're, the opposite extreme is, hey, Lucky, they asked me, have you, what do you know about large language models and developing, and I don't see this as a large language model. When you have, I think it's more of a decentralized language model, smaller models that like Llama that people are taking in, and they're putting it in small areas like security, saying, hey, how can we better do security with this model and improve our efficiencies? And there is no real expectation, just what are we going to learn? And we're getting a lot of that. I'm getting a lot of that too. So the extreme is, what can we do to make ourselves more efficient? And the others are, where can I save time? But all of them are great questions, and all of them AI can support. And I've seen them, develop, a new understanding, a new way of doing things. And the other use case is my students. I was teaching just last week or 2 weeks ago, and in working with my students, I gave them a scenario, and instead of writing the code, they co-piloted it up, and then they got an answer in minutes. I've had students cry, and I'm not putting them. It's not an easy thing to just think of code on the fly, and I could put up, I could do something quickly in my head because I'm used to doing it and say, this is going to be 5 lines of code. My students brought it up in function. It was a function. And said, no, it's going to be 3 lines. And I said, no. Without the function, it's 5 lines of code. So he asked Copilot, can you give me this same use case without the function? And it was 5 lines of code. And he looked at it and said, yeah, you're right. But the thing is, they were able to pull it up like that. It took me years and years of teaching to just say, this is what it's going to be. They're faster than I am, because I couldn't give them the exact lines. I could see the lines, but they had the exact lines of code for the use case. And it's where you see the speed at what we can now do things. And then we think, okay, this is now the norm.
Yeah.
So at the expenses of being a consultant, I'm a consultant, Gerard, you're a consultant. So, let's just beat ourselves up here. Consultants are literally at risk at losing their jobs because what Lucky just described, that better, faster, and cheaper. My 10 years, 20 years of experience is literally ChatGPT just popping it on an instant second because ChatGPT has access to all the consulting information that everybody needs, right? Yeah. The human aspect of it doesn't, but it literally has 90% of all the information that I'm going to give to the client, right? Mm-hmm. That's just me being upfront and honest. I'm in jeopardy, right? So, I feel cold actually. Better, faster, and cheaper. It's what we've been asking for, and that's what we're getting, right? Like this is what's happening. So, I have tons of use cases, right? Like because I'm a subject matter expert of database, database ETL process, the data processing piece of it, which is pretty much the fat middle that we are accustomed to, but then there's a slim tops, right? That's like data is everywhere, data use cases everywhere, and here I am, the data processing side of things. And this is the core component of how do you extract the data and make it work in the app level, right? Or in your devices. So one of the use cases that you should mention, ARAP, like my favorite go-to, right? But if you look at the RFP piece of it, like everybody will say RFP is probably the easiest one that AI can augment, right? If you look at that piece and you say, well, how would you write an RFP and you have the ability to describe my company in that RFP? If you don't train your Gen AI system to learn about, we'll just call it a standard operating procedure, the SOP, or let's just even say billing codes, right? You get the orders and you bill people. That's what all the business is, right? If your system is not able to read and understand what it is that you're billing, how much are you billing, what does this code means, ARAP goes to the disaster, but RFP doesn't work at all, right? So all of it starts at one point, but where do you start really matters, because at one point we have to talk about interoperability, sustainability, and scalability. Because if you start with the code, it goes to ARAP very easily. If you start with code, it will do RFPs for the rest of the life, right? Like it's just like that's how it is, right? But before we got into the recording, we talked about websites. That is the crucial piece of a lot of businesses, and it is the most vulnerable part of everything Gen AI. Either the bad guys are using it to take down the website, or the good guys are using it to secure their website. And then also doing SEOs, and then also doing lots of these quick updates that previously wasn't possible because it's very static. You have to log into a server to change your website, right? So, oh man, this is an exciting conversation.
I do want to go back to your comment around, or consultant becoming extinct, because I don't agree with that, right? And that's probably not a surprise to you, Steve, because as you may know, we wrote a global AI study 12 years ago or something. And in that, we also made the point that it's not going to take over everybody's jobs, because according to the same logic, Lucky will lose his job because cyber will be completely done by AI, which is also not true. Or RFP writers are losing their job, right? I think also going back to the other comments you made, it is better, faster, cheaper, which allows us more time for other things, right? So my main point would be don't be left behind. In other words, adopt AI, learn about AI, play with AI, see how it can make your role, your job, your function better, faster, cheaper, and go with it, right? I don't think many jobs or many parts of the industry are not becoming extinct. They're just becoming faster, better, and cheaper, which is great, because as an individual, we all want, to get rid of some of the mundane tasks and focus on the higher value ones, right? We all want to do that, right? And as a company, that's what you want as well, right?
Yeah. I think human brain always looks for optimization of things that are just not necessarily needed, right?
Yeah.
So, how do you find food? Well, you better have a better, faster, cheaper way to find food, which we do today, right? How do you find your information? Better, faster, and cheaper. Find it the fastest way possible. ChatGPT it, right? We used to do Google because that was the fastest way. Yeah. Now we made it even faster, right? A lot of people joke about the fact that ChatGPT is nothing but autocorrection on a better scale, right? Or autocomplete with Google. So. Yes, I totally agree with you. It's not the people that are at risk of losing their job. It's people that are not using AI is at risk of losing their job, because they're going to fall behind. Like that happened with internet, that happened with cloud, that happened with many of the technologies that we've seen, where things are that if you have confidence in technology that exists today, that technology will change eventually. Yeah. And when does it change? We used to have a timeline for it. Right. But now with AI, it's just like, I don't even know when that's going to happen. Right. Like, because it dramatically shifts every month, every day. Right. Yeah. OpenAI has the 12 days of OpenAI where they're just offering up new solutions for the next 12 days, 12 days of OpenAI. Right. So we are talking about use cases here because we talked about training, and this training pieces, we'll talk about use cases. But here's something that I've been fascinated by, which is that how do you make management feel comfortable about the risk that they're about to take? Because they think about risk all the time. But here's what I'm seeing. Yeah. Because it's cheaper, let's just go with the cheap option and put it in and see what happens, right? Yeah. Well, it's not actually making things better and faster. What it's doing is creating a congestion and creating a lot of these setbacks, and to say people are like, well, I don't want to use that anymore because that's nuisance, right? So even if it's cheaper today, it is causing a lot of people to kind of step back and say like, yeah, hold on a second. That better, faster is probably not worth it, because something, which is that it works on this one, it doesn't work on that one. It doesn't have interoperability with this one. And when it does have interoperability, now we're in trouble because cybersecurity comes in. Yeah. Now it's a vulnerability because we didn't really build that access management the way we should have, right? Yeah. So let's get into that, because we're all risk-minded people here, so we can talk about that.
You know what I see is I see that we're going to lose that ability to use that creative muscle a little bit or and the creative muscle will be see, I look at it this way. Okay, so if you don't use that ability to create, and you just have something created for you, then it's like over time you lose that ability, and it's going to be lost over generations to like almost like cursive, right? Right? They say you can't use cursive anymore. Well, what is it used for? Well, it's something that it's a skill, and it's something that makes us different, and so. You're right. I think with AI gives us the opportunity to have efficiencies, to do things faster, better. And if you get on the train and you adopt it and you learn how to use it as one of your tools, then you'll be better set for the future. That's just a hard fact. But the other side of it is leaning on it so much, the future generations. And I'm not trying to get pessimistic, but again. They just get handed a tool, and now it just works that way, and then they never learned of what it took to get to that point. And I look at it in my students, they were so sharp to say, hey, this is we can do this, and I said yes, but now don't use ChatGPT, don't use Copilot, and tell me the same thing.
Right.
And that ability, but is that a good thing? I don't know. I mean, that's ethical. It's at that point, is it a good thing, or are we just getting better?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, my suggestion, I fully agree with everything you said, Lucky. I think my suggestion for folks would be to at least approach the whole topic of responsible AI through a framework, through at least a conceptual approach, right? Or a model. And the first category is always legal and compliance, which is becoming a thing with, so many different jurisdictions have already enacted, like the EU Act, right? AI Act. So many are developing one right now, whether or not it's an industry, whether or not it's a constituency, a country, a region, whatever it is. So there's definitely legal and compliance things, like we always looked at, right? Lucky, as well from a cyber perspective, that's what you do as well. There's certain, risks and models that we use to counteract that, right? So that the first area is legal and compliance. The second one is ethical, and I'm gonna park that for a second. I'll come back to that. And then the third one, which is also conceptually not different than the way we've used it in any form of technology, which is risk management, right? And now the difference is that now we're looking at data risk as sort of the highest level of risk, I think, at least. The second one is model risk before you get into infrastructure risk. So a lot of it is the same as we used to approach it, because we always looked at data risk and infrastructure risk. Model risk is sort of the new thing, right? Yeah. That we've introduced. So you have to have, that's why I said you have to have sort of a methodology around it, model, framework, whatever it is, so you can look at this more holistically. Now, going back to ethical, certainly, that is a new, I wouldn't say completely new risk, because we've already had it in technology, but it's a more prevalent risk, particularly when you look at deep learning and machine learning, particularly when you use autonomous solutions instead of augmented solutions, right? I'm just saying there's a higher level of risk. In augmented, you can still have ethical risk. In Gen AI, you can still have, but typically it's less than in augmented, right? So I would still put it up there, but I can tell you that when you look at some of the use cases we already went through, enhancing, a finance process or an HR process, there's not a lot of ethical, debates there, right? But obviously, when you talk about autonomous cars, well, there's a lot of ethical debates that have been going on for, I don't know, at least a decade, right? So I would put them in those categories, and within those categories, there are already approaches and tools. There's even tools, right? We all know there's trust tools out there already. For instance, if you generate a lot of code, there's tools you can use to sort of check your code, right? As an example. So with every challenge comes a new, solution to help you with that, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I think what you're talking about with autonomous and augmentation, I think that is a good way of everybody to say, this is how I approach AI. One is human in the loop. I mean, both has human in the loop, but one literally requires more human in the loop than the other, right?
Yeah.
So I always think about it from the job perspective. People are talking about like, hey, what does Asif suggest when we have to adopt? I said, if you can reduce the repeatable, redundant, and dangerous tasks, take that away from the humans and let the humans do more human interactions, that's a win in a Asif's book,
Yeah.
right? So customer services, instead of having a robocalls, why don't we allow the humans to make the phone calls actually,
Yeah.
but make it so autonomous that humans literally are just engaging with another human, and the rest of the work, the notes taking, note processing,
Yeah.
rescheduling those calls, processing that order, is all done by an AI agent. And I think that's the evolution of artificial intelligence we're heading into, is this AI agents. So if it's autonomous, you need human in the loop. If it's augmented, you need human in the loop. We train the humans to say, this is how the AI will react because this is how the AI is built. That's the first step. That's the
Yeah.
first step to any technology.
Yeah.
And by the way, I always take advantage of this, because the biggest risk in cybersecurity is not cybersecurity hackers or the tools, is the end users.
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
failed to train the end users to protect our systems.
Yeah.
If the end users knew what to protect, they would protect it blindfolded. But the end users are the biggest risk. We cannot have that happen with AI.
Yeah.
And that is the biggest fear I have, because this is not cybersecurity anymore. This is a societal problem where AI will be abused beyond our control. People will abuse it. There is no ifs and buts about it. And we have to train the end users for that.
And Steve, you know the phrase that I use, right? It's a fool with a tool is still a fool.
I use that already in this way. Yeah, I credit you for that.
But it's the same. I completely agree with you here. It the same holds true, right? But my point was more that there's already techniques, solutions, and approaches out there that can help you through this, right? Because conceptually, not a huge ton has changed. It's just going better, faster, cheaper. But conceptually, not much has changed. In regards to responsible AI, most things haven't changed. When you use AI, you have to review it, right? Whether or not you have it done by a tool, whether or not you have it done by a third party or a colleague or whatever. But you use, for instance, in your example, your earlier example, we have an AI machine spit out a website for you. You still have to review it before you use it, right? We still have to go through that. We can't just blindly trust whatever something spits out, because there's always the review and edit, the enhancement that needs to take place as well. It's just getting there was so much faster, better, cheaper than just sitting there and coding yourself, or even later dragging and dropping. It still is faster, but you still have to review it like you did in the old days, right?
So, Lucky, just to fill you in, the conversation went like this, right? Because the websites that we develop today, with put inside of a server, lock it in, and have people access it, right? So the infrastructure goes that you develop the website, you put it out onto the internet, and people on the internet is able to access that website because it's sitting on a server somewhere. So next generation using Gen AI of website is that the static website that sits there, wait for somebody to come and request the poll, you have no website and no data servers. All you have, let's say, for example, you have a LinkedIn page. So your business LinkedIn page is continuously being updated with information from your customer review, customer service that you're providing, customer service that you're expert in. And when somebody requests your website using DNS, the same infrastructure that we have, but instead of going into that specific server, it goes out into the ether of large language models, right?
Oh, okay.
Access the information from the ether, and pops and generates a page instantaneously.
Wow.
But now you have the know-hows of what this customer is, right? If this is a 24-year-old, is it a 40-year-old? The difference would be that it's based on their personality. I generate a website. It's Gen AI created. So image in the background, all the text will match my business need because of my domain name, right? So there is no static website. And I was talking about those numbers here. So like there's about 1 billion websites in the world, and 400 million of them were used for ChatGPT, right? To train them. And there's not that many that is necessary. Like, everybody needs it, right? Everybody needs to use it on a daily basis. A lot of the static websites are just sitting there. So what if we literally have a website that just pops up? It generates every time you call for it, right? And it generates based off the information from places like LinkedIn and social media, right? If you posted yesterday on TikTok that you guys are selling Maybach instead of, I don't know, some foreign car, now everybody that accesses that website, they will know that Maybach is on your roster, right? Maybach is on the roster of your sales process. So if that's the case, that the last world we're moving into, there's a step-by-step process to it.
Mm-hmm.
Here's my concerns, is that these step-by-step process, you have to have understanding of all of it, right? You have to have the understanding of all of it, because it's happening so fast, and some of them are not in your control anymore, right? Because somebody else will have control over it. Either it's open source or somebody else that owns a lot of the databases or data servers. But you have to know the process, so that way all the stakeholders are involved to say, yeah, it's just not a website developer's problem. It's the CEO's problem. Because if the website is not working the way it's supposed to, getting hacked, attacked, or my competitor's websites is far better and more personalized than mine is, you have to think about these things, right? And you have to know them because you know the architecture, the infrastructure, right? I just mentioned domain name servers, and you got like no information about DNS. You have to know those little things because that's how people find you, right?
Yeah.
And previously we said like, oh, let the techies handle it. But now, because of Gen AI, I think everybody needs to have some say in it, the requirement gatherings, some input, the risk behind it. I can just go on forever with this one.
Yeah. And that gets back to how you look at use cases as well, right? So in your example, obviously, an Amazon is very different than an Exogen AI, right?
Right.
For Exogen AI, it's easy to have for a website, produced by, an AI tool, right?
Yeah.
Obviously, you're never going to do that for Amazon. Maybe pieces of code or pieces of functionality, yes, but because it needs to be something that is so highly competitive, and it needs to stand out, it needs to be unique, etc. And obviously, it powers so many transactions. It's very different than a lot of the industry, right? So that gets back to how do you evaluate use cases, right? Certainly, when you look at use cases for a pilot project, you look for those less risky areas that have some upside, right? Just to get started with it, right?
Yeah, I think that better, faster, and cheaper, cost-wise, right? Like you will see the shift that will happen, right? So, like with Gen AI, for a specific example of websites, you can have so many use cases. You can have a whole ecosystem just around website.
Wow.
But there's also your ecosystem for your use cases for your business. So we talked about AR, AP, we talked about codes, we talked about invoicing. But majority of the time, we look at it from the customer-facing solutions. How do we impress the customers using a website that has Gen AI built into it? All the images are Gen AI built. All the images are super fancy, super nice. We look at it from a customer-facing perspective, which is, in my opinion, is very risky, right? If it's facing the customer, it's very risky. You have to really start with the solid core, like coding and billing for your invoices. And
although getting back to what I said earlier as well is, at the very least, you can start with a, AI generated website, and then obviously review and edit, but expand and enhance as well, right? So when you use a public AI engine, obviously it's going to take everything from was it a 400 billion website you said? So it looks at all the sort of the common components, and it grabs that. So you can't expect that what you're going to get is a highly specialized website, right? But you can enhance it. Expect most of the work is already done.
That's right.
Now you can individualize it, you can expand it, etc. You can make it more unique, right? Still, you've saved a lot of work.
Yeah. Gives you a good starting point for sure.
Yeah.
A really good starting point, because I'm thinking as you guys are talking about this, there's a lot of different angles that different ways you can take it, but That's definitely, a benefit. And it goes. I see another area that's going to be problematic is just data vectors. Because right now we've always had the problem with, okay, all our data is on the internet, it's on the dark web, and so we know that, our data is out there, but what data is, how is this data being processed? How, and that really needs to be another area of focus for not just security, but like for yourself is, making sure that, the model is not just works, but is it trustworthy? Just like you said, the website, you have to have a man in the middle. I teach, or Gen AI. There's a certain portion of it that's like stable diffusion. You say do this, and it gives you an output. Then you look at the output, and it has like 6 fingers. You're like, wait a minute, that's not, the humans don't have 6 fingers. So you're like, it's a great picture, and then you look at the fine detail, and you're like, oh, it's off just a little bit. And we still need to be in that gap, like you said, the man in the middle, or the human in the human that's being able to determine whether this AI is, spot on or spot off.
Yeah.
And for the websites, it's a great thing. But I think the security aspect that I see is just, can you trust the model? Because where is the data? How was it trained, or what was the data vector? And that would be, the focus for, people just that don't know. They don't know. They just, is the model working? Does it work? Is it fantastic? Is it faster? Am I faster? How do we get to that point? And then we need to be able to say, oh, how did we get to that point? Can we trust these models? And that's another area, because yeah, it works. Okay, yeah, and then we're running through, but are we in a stone car? Is the data trustworthy, or did we do something that we shouldn't have done? And we don't know, because we just trust the AI works.
Yeah.
Whatever the AI is, generative AI, large language models, those are the big thing. But those are other areas that we need that people still don't, they haven't got to that area of risk. And people like yourself, Gen AI can help guide people and say, okay, how do we adopt AI, but do it the right way?
Yeah. So one thing, and I might have mentioned it before. So one thing we always tell people is, before you start using AI in a business setting, always understand how it works, right? At least at a high level, how it works, what it does do, what it doesn't do, what is public, what is private, all that great stuff, right? Which gets back to, then you also understand that you still need to review and edit, enhance, expand, whatever it is, right? And you also understand that there are areas of risk. So an example of the website, well, the front end, having a front end being developed by a tool and then reviewing, editing, enhancing, expanding, there's nothing wrong with that. But obviously, you're not gonna, have it also, well, maybe only a draft, but having it develop the automatically the backend to your highly private database, right? With, a couple million of private data sets in there, right? You're not going to do that, not even in a test book, right? So understanding what the AI engine will do, can do, should do, and what you probably are better off not having done by the AI engine, or like I said, maybe a draft and then letting it loose on the actual data source, right? And that also begs the question that the best results of AI is when you can feed it your data, right? Because so go back to where we started with RFPs, right? Well, if you go out on the web right now and you use any of the public tools, it will use any RFPs available on the internet, right? Which is a lot. But obviously, if you want to have it work better, then you have to feed them your RFPs that you have developed over the decades or whatever it is. So there are ways of using private data, those private data sources, in a secure way, right, with AI tools as well, right? And that enhances the outcome and is more secure.
Yeah. So, well, if you can imagine why we talk about this continuously and nonstop, is because we are SMART community, right? Which stands for specialist, methods, advocates, research and training, right? We need specialists to understand the methods of advocating for whatever that advocacy means, right? Your profession, your job, your safety, AI safety, kid safety, family safety, whatever you feel advocating for, and you want to research and train for that, come to this community and we will give you the best formula possible based on your personal goal, right? So any specialist that is looking to understand the methods behind artificial intelligence, smart AI communities for you, right? Because we are inviting the specialists, S is for specialists and for methods. We want to show you the methods of AI, so that way when you are research and training, you're not research and training for years and years. You can research and train based on how you would like to research and train. One of the things that I've been advocating is for that on a weekly basis or a daily basis, you should have some AI time just to understand AI. Because it's not necessarily a business problem anymore. This is a societal problem. There's a lot of misinformation, a lot of disinformation. I wrote a few articles about that. I kind of looked at it from the Cold War era perspective and compared it from today's perspective. Because further you can look back in the past, further you are able to look forward into the future. But in order to not deceive yourself, you have to understand the infrastructure, the hardware that allows these sort of things to happen today, hardware that didn't allow things to happen before, right? That's also been the chokehold. So we talked about AI winter, AI summer. We're going into another AI winter as we speak, right? But it's not going to be the same as last AI winter. We're not just going to say, well, just forget it, right? AI winter happened back in the 80s, right? But it came back again in 2010s. It's going to remain for a while. Then we're going to hit the hardware choke point one more time, right? If we don't, great, but still, it's going to be another AI summer coming after that. So it's always been about augmentation and autonomy. We talk about like a lot of RPAs, right? Humanoid robots that are coming into the scenes. I saw Kim Kardashian with robots the other day, and people were just like, my God, these robots are not in the future anymore. Those are literally in people's house, right? So, Smart AI community, if you come to us, you're going to see the information the way you need to see it, which we talk a lot about the power grid. How does AI impact the power grid? How much power is being consumed by the data centers? That if these powers are being generated using water, what happens to the sources of water, right? So if you look at it from the blast radius perspective, from you to AI and all the way to the source of water, we really have to start thinking about how do we do all of this, right? The CEO of AT&T actually brought up a good point the other day that, you want AI the way you see it today is concerning because few million people use it. Do you not think 9 billion people at one point would also want AI? And how do you provide those AI-like capabilities to those individuals? We have to really do fascinating magic to get AI to 9 billion people, right? So that's my little spiel about smart AI community.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's going to cost a lot of water.
Yeah. A lot of water, a lot of power, a lot of data, by the way, as well, right? We went from a time where collecting too much data was not good to a time where we're in right now where we're collecting more data than ever before, and we continue to collect it. So to your point of Steve, if we're going to expand AI to 9 billion people, the amount of data is just unfathomable, right? So we need to get back into a mode where we get rid of the dirty data, the bad data, and have a cleansing mechanism going forward. Because at one point in time, there's just too much data, right? Even the AI machines will have a difficulty weeding out the good versus bad data, right?
Well, I have good news about that. NeurIPS, I think, just happened last week, and they are talking about system that can unlearn, which in human brain is impossible, but they're pushing for it because unlearning means that's a good thing. So great. I think that's a great initiative. And Gerard, to your point about things that we have to accomplish, right? We have to accomplish it for the purpose of business, but we also have to accomplish that for the purposes of environment, right? There's the way we can engage AI today is not only cheaper, but it's also a responsible way we can go ahead with it, right? Because what happens is that if you engage with AI today, all of a sudden it costs nothing, but tomorrow it costs 100, and the next day it costs a million. We don't want that. And a lot of companies are finding that out. Yeah, well, kind of finding out. I don't want to say how. But I think that's one of the things that we have to think about is that just because you're responsible doesn't mean you lose out. Yeah. There's lots of ways to do AIs today that you're not going to lose out because everybody's jumping into the hype cycle, right? We've been doing AIs for hundreds of years at this point. We know what works and what doesn't work, right? Yeah. Like you said, data is a core component. How you process that data, how much does that cost you? Who controls that data processing, and where's the data coming from? If you know those things, you are better off because you're not going to get that ballooning shock of the cost, right? So there's lots of ways to approach AI, and of course, XGen AI is literally at the front of it, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
Let's tell a little bit about XGen AI. Let them hear it.
Yeah, I mean, as we discussed on this podcast, there are some challenges and difficulties with starting with AI. There are some challenges and difficulties with using AI. There's questions around AI, and what better way to approach it with folks that have been there, done that, right? So even though we're a startup, cumulatively we have probably over 100 years experience, right, with some of the folks that are part of our team. So it's always good to have that sounding board. It's always good to have that guidance around how do I approach it? What are the things that I need to look out for? How can I approach it in a way that it's actually going to generate some benefits for me, right? So more than happy to help anybody who's at any of those points, right? Any of those inflection points, just started, but don't have a lot to show for yet, or started and I have a foundation, but now I need to expand it. Happy to help in any of those areas.
Yeah, and it comes back to that people, process, and technology. Technology is what most people can focus on because that's what generates the revenue. But the process is what the business headache is, right? If you have the best process, the optimized process, you're great. But you have to really take care of your people. Because people allows the process to happen, and that process gives birth to technology. Yeah. So if technology makes money, people are the ones that's pushing for it, right? So I think we have a core focus on the people, and that's what I love about this energy that we have between Lucky, Gerard, and myself, is that the people, if we can change their mindsets to say, it doesn't have to be about today, it has to be about tomorrow, day after tomorrow, and years from now, right? Because technology exponentially grows and you have to be adaptive to it, right? So your process has to change continuously. And the process that we have seen that has worked very well, like just take a website, for example. You said, we need a website for our business. How many days does it take? Years. Well, that was the case 25 years ago. But today, I can literally pop up a website in 30 seconds, right? Because I use Canva. I just write up some stuff. All of a sudden, I have a link and a website. If you're happy with it, you'll use it, right? But there's always time for interoperability, scalability, and sustainability for everything we're working with. So, Lucky, I think this has been the conversation just the way you imagine it with Gerard, right? It's just like you knew what you wanted, and that's exactly what Gerard gave.
Yeah, this is fantastic, Gerard. Thank you. We look at AI and we like to know how it's going to help us in the future, but we have to take a look at the past, and it's, if we look at life and we kind of just look outside the box, and life imitates art and art imitates life, we can learn a lot from what AI could be, and then we can just take small steps and build to that. But as soon as we get on, if we don't get on, then we'll be looking at it from a negative aspect. So I think AI is here to help, and with the help of people like XGen AI, we could get to that point. So Gerard, thank you for your time today, and I look forward to talking to you more in the future.
My pleasure. Enjoy the rest of your weekend.
Gerard, thank you so much. Really enjoy the weekend, and I'm looking forward to continuing this conversation. So happy Sunday.
All right.
Signing out from ay.
Ay, 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 ay.
Ay, ay, ay.